Hello, everybody. Hello, Magdalena. Hello, Vicky.
Hi.
Hello.
So we are super excited to be here together today. We are three IFS therapists. And in addition to that, we are also linked by the fact that we are sexual and gender diversity therapists. We have connected together through this project in a way that we will tell you all about shortly. But first things first, let's hear a bit more from each of us, starting with Magdalena, then Vicky, then I'll say something about myself. So Magdalena, hi. Tell us about you.
Thank you, Alessio. So my name is Magdalena Sigur-Kabanak. I'm a Gestalt and IFS therapist, and I'm trained in gender, sex, relational diversity therapy. And I'm based in Vienna, Austria. I'm very happy to be here with you too.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I am Victoria Kirby, or Vicky. I'm really happy to be here as well. I originally trained in integrative psychotherapy, so psychodynamic and person-centered, and then went on to train in IFS. I've got an advanced accreditation as a gender, sexuality, and relationship diversities therapist. And I'm currently working in private practice with individuals and couples.
Thank you, Vicky. And so, so that's me. I'm Alessio. I am Italian. I was born there, but I live in London. I trained as a Gestalt psychotherapist here, and then as an IFS therapist. And I'm also in the field of sexual and gender diversity. And yes, we're shortly going to start to talk about the model. And now we're going to talk about, this model, how it came about. And I want to give a little bit of time to share the model that you came up with. You've called it the Star of Self. And in a little while, you will tell us everything about this model. I have a lot of questions about it. I'm sure all the listeners or watcher will have questions too. But before we go to the Star of Self, I thought it'd be good to give you a little bit of an idea of how this model came together. So yes, Magdalena and Vicky, how did you come up with this?
So the story started when I did my Pink Therapy training. So that's the gender, relational, sex, diversity training in the UK. And I had a module about gender identity, and I was reading through the material that is available to describe gender identity formation. And I realized that I'm not really satisfied with the content. Like I didn't like what was offered, especially because I did the IFS training like the year before. And I thought like, I'd love to combine IFS with gender identity, like with these topics of diversity and identity development, because I really appreciate the idea of self-energy. And I think it's a very resourceful thing. So I was sitting with my thoughts around that, and I was in a professional WhatsApp group where Victoria was a member too. And Victoria posted she was offering trainings in IFS and sexuality trainings. And I got really curious about that, because that's exactly the area I'm so interested in. And we also had some other common interests that I realized reading her posts in that group. And then I listened to her podcast. Yes, and then I listened to Victoria's podcast on IFS talks around sexuality and shame. And yeah, I was just really fascinated. And then I wrote to Victoria and I introduced myself, and I asked her if she wanted to talk and meet and see where things are going. And she said yes.
Amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, and from there a lovely relationship developed, and I was really happy to be contacted by Magdalena because I was preparing my training at the time, and part of that training was thinking about sexual and gender diversity and identity formation, and I was really keen to look at a model that used IFS. So we were really doing the same work at the same time, and it was great timing to come together and work on that. And I think we'd both looked at the models out there, and the CAS model in particular, which is 40 years old and probably, you know, out of date now, very focused on you know, maybe quite appropriate for certain diversity and you know, like cisgender white gay men, and you know, 40 years ago, when like so much has changed since then in our societies, and so that model, you know, whilst it does provide some amazing thoughts, it's, you know, we both felt really it was out of date. It is out of date. And
yeah, which brings up the other question as to why, you know, you felt the need to create a new model. And you've already answered it, but I don't know if you want to add anything else to this, because by the sound of it, the only model that existed was a bit outdated.
Well, what I can say is that whenever I read other models of identity formation, I always had the feeling as if the focus it's on the individual, and it's rather like how did they deal with something difficult, like with a problem. It was like the focus was kind of negative. But to me, I always thought like queer people coming out, people like expressing themselves, exploring themselves, are so courageous and are so like I always admire that whenever I see people expressing their true self. Like this is something I admire. So I really want to create a model that has this positive focus, that really is affirming of diversity.
Beautiful.
Yeah, really beautiful. And I think, you know, as well with our model, because, and we'll talk more about this, it's a star. People can go between the different points, that, you know, some points may not be that relevant for certain people. So it's much less linear and prescriptive than the stage models, which also imply this kind of end goal. And actually, like as humans, we're always thinking about identity and rethinking about our identity, and going through this process of self-development, and we don't get to an end goal.
And you know, really that's where I come in a little bit, because I was Magdalena's supervisor during her pink therapy training, and as part of your assignment, Magdalena, you had to publish your final essay on a blog, and I was very happy to host it. So you can read, everybody and all the listeners and watchers can access the model for free. And I was so excited about this model because, again, it moves away from these stages, and it pays, you know, respect to the courage that it takes to come out. So that I was very happy to propose that we do all this together. And in a moment we'll go into the star and the model, but I also wanted to kind of really state how, you know, open we all are to any form of feedback or you know, criticism if for some reason we don't use a language that honors everybody. We know that about the limitations of the model. We actually want as many people as possible to talk about it and to kind of enrich it with all different forms of diversity and ways of life.
Yeah, thank you for saying that, Alessio. That's really important.
Thank you. Okay then, so let's go to the model. So because of this beautiful creation you've made, I'm gonna keep it on screen as Magdalena and Vicky explain to all of us what this beautiful model is about. In the meantime, I try to set up the technical bit. So before we start, I'm gonna just quickly say how this is gonna work. So Magdalena and Vicky will take us through all the elements of this diagram, starting with ground zero. Then we'll go through awareness and questioning, and we'll follow the star. So we'll go to accepting, sharing, and so on. We will keep this on screen so that my green arrow here will tell you which bit we're discussing as we go. Okay then, so let's start with ground zero. And the first one talk is going to be Vicky.
Thank you. So ground zero is a description of the world and the society into which we're born, and many of us are born. And I think what is so useful about thinking about ground zero is the idea that we as humans, we absorb a lot of norms around gender and sexuality and sexual identity, that we absorb those norms before we've even had a chance to think about our own gender, our own sexuality, our own identity. And so we live in this society where there's really huge assumptions that people are going to be heterosexual, that they're going to be cisgendered, that we experience sexuality in the same way, that everyone experiences sexual desire, that people will have monogamous relationships. And those assumptions are really embedded into society. And so people are born into their breathing, living and breathing all these assumptions, all these norms, before ever really having a chance to name or think about the fact that they have a sexuality or a gender.
So this is the ground zero, really, this set of assumptions that we all swim into.
Do you want to add anything to that, Magdalena?
Well, the living in ground zero and experiencing that maybe one's own truth is a little bit different from that can be really frightening for people. And all these norms, they create hierarchies in society. And I think these are very important aspects around ground zero and people living in ground zero. Because people can be burdened with a lot of fear and loneliness in this field.
And what you said earlier, Magdalena, about those models of development that are very individualistic, with the additional ground zero, what you have done, both of you have done, is that you've put a context to this. And we all, I'm sure we can all resonate with what you're talking to about ground zero, about how many assumptions were there when we developed and still exist everywhere we go. All right, so thank you. Do you want to add anything else, Vicky, about?
Well, I mean, I was just thinking about different places in the world, and in some places, laws as well, and like different political situations that ground zero is also dependent on where we're born into the world. And so we're talking about norms and the impact of that. And of course, in some places, it's also laws that are having that impact.
So in a way, this ground zero makes this star very dynamic, because a change in ground zero, I imagine, has an impact on all the other aspects of the star. Okay. Are we ready to move on to the next one?
Yes.
So Magdalena, you are going to talk to us about awareness and questioning, right?
Yes. So becoming aware of non-conforming feelings in ground zero and acknowledging them is a self-led process. So this is a very important aspect of our model. Like becoming aware of being different is self-led. And yeah, this is a major difference, I think, to other models.
Yeah. And I don't know whether you want to say a bit more about what you mean by self-led, but we'll surely add some extra descriptions under the video. But
well,
yes.
it takes courage to realize you're different.
Yes.
It takes curiosity to become aware, to explore yourself, and it takes compassion to soothe yourself or to be with yourself in this process that can be frightening, of course.
Yes.
So this is what we mean with self-led, or
and you've named 3 important qualities of self: curiosity, compassion, and courage. Yes.
Exactly.
Okay.
And what it can be, of course, if you're like, if parts of you, or you are questioning yourself, there might be parts that might be blocking this process, that might be it might be too frightening for some parts to think about, like not conforming to the norm. And some may acknowledge the feelings and realize, yes, that's my truth. So this is really what defines this period of really questioning, changing one's mind, trying, wondering what one's truth really is.
Yes. Yeah. And it all depends on, not all depends, but it's very linked to ground zero and to the norms surrounding the person. Yes. Okay.
And like Victoria said before, there might be places on this earth where this is just frightening, and there might be places where this is like dangerous. And where people couldn't go further than this, like knowing for themselves that they're that they're queer, for example, but they would never be able to accept that or even express it or something. And this is not something that is wrong about them, but this is where the outer world and the inner world meets. And depending on how much self energy is in the field, how tolerant the world is where the people live in, the further they can develop their true identity or their true
Vicky, did you want to add anything, or no?
No.
Because I wanted to jump in and say something, because I'm the least expert of the 3 of us in this model, so I appreciate how we're trying to talk about one of these aspects, but as people can see from the start, they're all very much interconnected, because it is not a staged model. And correct me if I'm wrong, this is something that people can partly go through a different point in life, and they can see you all nodding. Okay, so I got it right. So then probably it's impossible to speak too much about one of them without talking already about the other one. And the next one is accepting. So I'm gonna ask Vicky to tell us a bit more what you mean by accepting in this model.
Yeah, I mean, to follow on from lots of points that you both just made, I mean, accepting is a continuation in some ways of the awareness and questioning, and really, again, a very self-led process. It really takes courage to accept something which goes against the norm, which can feel frightening, and compassion, self-compassion, and also this point on the star is about clarity, that acceptance of like, yes, this is who I am. And that's that takes real self energy to get to that point of kind of calmness, almost, of like, yeah, this is me. And I think one of the really great things about using IFS for a model like this is that parts can go through the process at different times. So some parts might be getting to a place of acceptance, and other parts may be still too frightened. Or someone, maybe them, like the majority of their parts are at this point of acceptance, but then something happens in the outside world that brings back online maybe parts that want to deny feelings that for a range of reasons might not feel safe. But yeah, I mean, overall, this point, being at this point, is a time when maybe the majority of parts have come to that place where they feel safe and maybe unburdened enough to be able to accept non-conforming feelings. And also to say, some people, I'm thinking particularly about people that are very young now in certain communities, these points might happen at the same time, depending on their family and their school community, maybe, and when we hope that this would be wonderful if these can happen at the same time, that someone's becoming aware of feelings, questioning them, accepting them, and that's like one process for parts.
Yeah. Definitely, it can be something that we hope it all happens at the same time, but sometimes it can happen part by part, depending on many circumstances. Yeah, beautiful. Magdalena, do you want to add anything to the acceptance, or shall we go to sharing?
No, we can go to sharing. And
so
yeah,
I wanted to say something in between one, because you called them cornerstones, right? Called each of them cornerstone, and I want to say this, but we'll show it later to everybody. There is another version of this star with the self-energy qualities listed, because, and we'll show them later, but as you were talking, my attention went to the center when it says self-energy, and I started to see this as a development of self-energy as well. So yeah, layers and layers in this model. Okay, I wanted to say that. So Magdalena, do you want to talk about sharing?
Yeah. What Victoria just said with awareness and questioning and accepting can be at the same time. It can also be at the same time with sharing, because young people might not have accepted fully who they are, but they share and they try out how do people react if I tell them that I'm queer or whatever their identity might be, and just see how people react, or how what feels like congruent to them or right for them. And people can share their feelings by coming out and just talking to people about their identity. But it could also be that people just let like very special people in.
Yes.
Depending on where people live and their whole other identities, there are different ways of sharing your identity. And we don't want to create a narrative of how to come out or how to do it to be a proper queer person or a proper, I don't know, person with a certain gender identity or sexual identity. So this is very important, that there is not one way to do it, but it's important to find your own way to deal and to share your feelings with other people.
Yeah. Well, thank you for this. Vicky, can I say something? Or yeah. There's something here you're highlighting between acceptance and sharing. When I was looking through the model, I thought, oh yeah, I need to accept myself before I share. But how true it is that by sharing, even the fact that we might be, confused because we don't have any point of reference around us, that sharing with someone can lead to more acceptance, for example. So I really can see how you have moved away from a stage model, really, and what you're describing is quite an intricate process of, you know, each of these qualities can help each other
Yes.
somehow to expand this self-energy.
Yes.
Okay.
And like we all know people we can be more vulnerable around. So maybe one person starts with sharing their feelings with a person they can be vulnerable around. And if that person reacts in a good way, like is welcoming or is accepting too, it's much easier for the person to be accepting themselves. But if they open up large scale because they think they have to, and then other people will not understand or not believe them or whatever, it could also set them back and they take another spiral in doubting themselves or questioning.
Yeah, and let's not forget about ground zero here and the fact that in some countries, being homosexual or any other deviation from heteronormative and heterosexuality is a crime. And if it's not a crime, there are honor killings around. So, you know, what you said about trust and sharing and, you know, the fact that it's really one's own journey is very important. And one's own journey might be to come out on a public scale, for example, and create a big change.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think also it's important to point out that, you know, if it wasn't always the assumption that somebody identifies as a binary gender or is heterosexual, you know, if that wasn't always the assumption, then it wouldn't, then like coming out wouldn't be necessary.
Yeah.
You know, it's like a privilege to not have to think about that, and you know, and even the expression coming out, like it's important to think that it's not, I know that we've talked about this before, Magdalena, like it's not owed to anybody, and it's not sharing like a, you know, almost like there's a secret I have to tell people. Like that's why I really love that, like letting people in. It's like just wanting people to maybe know you better.
Yeah. And yes, and I'd love to add the self qualities that are needed for that cornerstone, because it takes a lot of courage, confidence, and connectedness and persistence and patience and perspective to really go, like to really be courageous enough to share your true self with other people.
Yeah. Thank you. All right. Looks like we spent quite some time on sharing. Shall we go to community?
Yeah, this is a really lovely point on the star. I mean, it's community is so important for us as humans. We're like hardwired to be in connection with other people. And if somebody is part of any kind of minority, then being part of a collective of people in which they can be themselves, maybe see themselves reflected in other people, is it's just so huge. So this point is a really lovely one, of how can people find some kind of community, some kind of collective in which they can feel a sense of belonging or a sense of being part of. And of course, the ability to access community is going to be really different for different people, depending a lot on, you know, where they're physically located, if they're, you know, if they have internet, their, you know, age, disability, like lots of things will impact on how people can find community and where and in what way, and also the meaning of this will be really different for different people. You know, so some people, for example, might really want to find like a queer community that they can find that sense of belonging in, and for another person that may not be so important because they're existing in other communities.
Yeah. And how important it is for people to find a sense of community, either physical or virtual through the internet.
Yeah. And we can think about like self-led communities as well. It's about finding a place in which somebody feels that compassion, feels that like acceptance, and to feel that from other people is incredibly healing. That process of showing others parts of ourselves that we feel shame for, or we feel uncertainty about, and having that accepted by other people and loved by other people is incredibly healing.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. And I think it goes two ways. If someone is born in a community that's already, inducive and conducive of diversity, that self-led community can give self-energy to the system, right?
Absolutely. And thinking about something like schools, like a school environment, it's just so impactful in that sense. And families as well, and faith communities, and lots of different kinds of communities that can have an impact on how somebody like feels about feelings that are maybe non-conforming.
And also, like you said before, the queer community is also so important to heal the internalized shame of the internalized homophobia or biphobia or transphobia, because through the connection and the sense of belonging, the shame can actually heal. And we will talk about healing later in the Star of Self, but it's all along the way, like having a community, having the sense of belonging, being part of a group with similar interests and being appreciated there does heal this painful parts, or does contribute to healing.
Yes. And healing is our final bit, right?
An ongoing process. Like there is no final cornerstone, because
it's the final for today's video. So,
no, it's not.
Is it not?
No, we've got a few others. Self-expression and processing anger and grief.
No, but I think Alessio meant healing is the last cornerstone.
Yeah, healing. So next one is processing anger and grief.
Yes.
So Magdalena.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
A person that has been hindered to express themselves freely and live their life freely misses out on a range of satisfying experiences. So it makes sense that that person feels grief and anger. And becoming aware of these feelings and processing them is a very important step on the way. It's a very important cornerstone, because these feelings are valid, and it makes completely sense that people would feel angry, because they can't participate in the same way. There are more obstacles, and so these are valid feelings that have to find a good outlet, so that people won't use their or that they don't put the anger against themselves. So it's very important to find a productive outlet. Ideally a self-led outlet.
We know that these feelings, if they're not acknowledged, they can create all sorts of difficulties.
Yes. So some people find it helpful to invest their energy in political engagement, for example, or supporting other people, or creating or holding space for community groups, or support from and belonging with others, like connecting to people who relate, or self-support, like therapy and self-compassion can be really helpful to find ways to deal with anger and grief.
Yes. Thank you. Is there anything else you want to add, Vicky, to this, or can we move on to the next one, which is self-expression?
Just on this point, it's nice to acknowledge, like, often anger and grief can come online because other parts are maybe unburdened and allowing more space in the system. So whilst someone's maybe very focused on, you know, there's something wrong with them, like, you know, internalizing things, when those parts are unburdened, suddenly there's a, you know, like a looking outwards process of like, oh, this is really unfair. Like, this is really unfair that I missed out on these things, and actually I deserved to have them. And so there's something also really positive about this, being in this place and acknowledging, like you said, like very, very valid feelings, and so essential, as you've said, to find positive outlets for them so that they don't also become internalized and create more pain for somebody.
Yeah. And Vicky, you said something important about how, if I understood correctly, how the more we grow, heal, and unburden, the more we might be surprised sometimes that new anger comes up. It's just that it was there, but it couldn't emerge until now.
And it links into that, the affirmative therapy approach of, like, you know, you're not the problem, I'm not the problem, like, aspects of society are creating the problem. It's moving shit. It's a big shift.
Yes. All right, shall we go to self-expression?
Here
we are.
So self-expression is like that, the outward expression of someone's sexual or gender identity, and I think it's important to note that, you know, like, all of these points, like, they're not all important for all people, and certainly self-expression can be really different for different people, and you know, for some people, self-expression might feel a really important part of a process of, like, getting to know and celebrating themselves. And it also, you know, depending on someone's age and life journey, it can also tie into that sort of, you know, becoming like an adult, or, you know, becoming like an individual and expressing oneself in that way. You know, through, like, things like the way that someone looks, or the way they choose to have their appearance. And it can be a really playful place as well, like, you know, tying in again to the sense of one's kind of truth, and having courage to be like, this is me, and this is how I'm choosing to express myself in whatever way, you know, not just how someone looks, but maybe through, like, art, or you know, creating things.
And as I read self-expression, I remember one of the models that has helped the model, and that's also in the essay, is the gender unicorn, and how that uses the idea of expression and identity. And as you are saying, it's very unique way, and but also very important, because there might be a subgroup of the queer community that expresses themselves in a certain way, and you might want to find your own way to fit in that group, you know, holding the same identity and a different way of expressing yourself.
And it can be a really exploratory process. Someone might feel like they really want to be very outwardly identified with a certain subgroup at some point in their life, and that may be a really, there's like a playful exploratory thing. And also, you know, one with a lot of meaning, like, you know, one that's a way of like displaying an aspect of identity in a really important way.
Amazing. So Magdalena, do you want to add anything, or should we go to healing?
What I just realized listening to you, Victoria, was that, like, anger is actually like it comes from aggression, right? And aggression is life force. And the self-expression is like really the direction of the aggression, like out in the world, showing myself. It takes a lot of courage to really show yourself in whatever way feels right to you. So yeah, that's also one I had.
Yeah.
Yeah. Shall we go to healing, Magdalena?
Yes.
All right, so that's the final cornerstone, right? Yes. Okay.
So the final cornerstone is healing of shame. And this is something most of the people, if not all of the people, have to deal with in their life. Because living in a world that is burdened with patriarchy, we all have a lot of shame burdens in our systems, feeling not good enough. And this can be a lifelong process, and it is for many of us. So this is not the final stage where, and when once you did that, you're healed or something, but it really means like really to befriend the work you have to do to deal with shame. And there are many layers of shame, and you can really let go of a lot of burdens around shame. And people living in people who experience marginalization in their life, they carry more shame burdens than people with less or with more privilege, actually. So this is also important because it makes visible how this power dynamics, these hierarchies, actually work a lot with shame. And the more the more burdened you are, with shame, the more you have to work to free yourself from it. Yes.
So this step is really about healing shame. And I want to correct my language here, because it is the last that we've chosen today because we had to go in a sequence. But again, it is not, there is no one better coming before or after the other of these cornerstones.
Yes, because healing shame is something people will do throughout the process all the time. Because we have so much internalized homophobia and biphobia, transphobia, that we all carry shame, and so letting go of shame is a process, is something throughout the process. Makes sense.
Yeah, and so shame and burdening is really kind of integral actually to lots of these points on the star.
Yeah. And whenever you find another shame burden, it might be that you feel anger again or grief, and that you have to find a way to accept that and talk to other people about it. So it's really, this star is not a linear process, as we said many times before. It's really, it's how life really shows itself.
And I think, you know, the compassion aspect of self-energy is so integral to healing shame, and so beautiful. We think about, you know, compassion and connection is really like the opposite to shame, the things that heal shame, and that comes from our self-energy and from the self-energy of people around us. And so that's it. It's such a nice thing to bring into this kind of being at the core of this model.
Yeah.
All right. So shall I stop sharing this image for now?
We could bring on the other star self with all the
Yes.
qualities of self-energy.
Yeah, and then we can say goodbye.
Yeah.
All right. So here we are, and let's quickly show. Where is it? Okay. So, yeah.
Yes.
Tell us what this is.
So here we can see all the qualities of self named, and I will read them out.
Yes.
It's curiosity, it's creativity, it's courage, it's playfulness, connectedness, presence, clarity, consciousness, compassion, patience, calm, persistence, confidence, and perspective.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yes.
I got goosebumps.
Yeah. Just reading these words.
Mm.
Yeah.
Knowing
Yeah.
that we all got these qualities in us
Yeah.
when we have to deal with the world,
Yeah.
with navigating ourselves in the world.
Yes. And this picture is also available in the blog article that you've published. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, then. So I almost don't want to stop sharing this picture for how beautiful it is, but let me slowly find the courage to click stop sharing. Okay, then. So I think this is all for
Oh, for now.
this video. Well, thank you so much. Let's just hear from everybody before we say goodbye. So, yeah,
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you to both of you.
thank you.
Yeah, I want to thank you too. I really enjoyed that. And I'm looking forward to our second meeting when we're going to discuss further questions around this model.
True. Yes. So we have planned a second meeting, but we thought we would do this one to put the model out there. So this is me coming to an end, thanking Vicki and Magdalena a lot for doing this together. We'll put links and extra resources in the comments below. And we really want and invite people to interact with the video, leave comments, or like it, or contact any of us. And because, yeah, we want this model to get to as many people as possible, because I believe and we believe it can really help and make a difference. So from me and from, I think, for the queer community that we represent, thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.